Zane Smith has signed a multi-year contract with Trackhouse Racing and will drive for Spire Motorsports in 2024, and Bristol Dirt will not return in 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got to NASCAR, another motorsports story discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. Before I talk about all the other stories, though, yesterday, major tragedy struck the motorsports community. Unfortunately, Sherry Pollex passed away at the age of 44 yesterday. Sherry Pollex has been one of the biggest inspirations in NASCAR, one of the biggest inspirations I have ever seen, and she had a major impact on the motorsports community. I want to send my thoughts and condolences out to Sherry Pollex during this really tragic time. She was only 44 years old. My prayers and condolences do go out to the Pollex family and the motorsports community at this time. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. As Joe Gibbs Racing put out a tweet after the NASCAR Cup Series race that Denny Hamlin had led his 14,000 laps during the NASCAR Cup Series race at Bristol. Of course, Denny Hamlin went on to win the Cup Series race at Bristol. But with Denny Hamlin reaching 14,000 laps led in the Cup Series, he becomes only the 12th driver to reach that goal. That is absolutely incredible. Denny Hamlin, of course, one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time. I think it's safe to say now that he is the greatest driver to never win a NASCAR Cup Series championship at this point, but there's a good chance he could win the championship this year in 2023. But I think that is an amazing and incredible accomplishment, and nonetheless, congratulations to Denny Hamlin on reaching that awesome and an incredible accomplishment. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kiffin Simpson. As it was announced this morning that Kiffin Simpson will drive in a 5th chip Ganassi racing car full-time in 2024. Kiffin Simpson has won the Sebring 12 Hours. I think he won it in 2022 or 2023. And he's only 18 years old. Now, he did race Indy NXT last year. I think he finished 9th or 8th in the championship last year in 2023. A major reason why he is going to be driving full-time for Ganassi is because he has Ridgeline sponsorship. His dad is the owner of that company. And, of course, they have sponsored Marcus Armstrong and multiple other drivers at this team for the last 2 years. I think Kiffin does have a lot of talent, though. He might struggle as a rookie, but remember, like I just mentioned, he's only 18 or 19 years old. So I think he's got a lot to prove, and I think he'll be able to prove that going into the 2024 IndyCar season. Their lineup is stacked going to 2024. They've got Linus Lundqvist joining the team in 2024. Of course, Marcus Armstrong's going full-time, and you've got Alex Pun and Scott Dixon driving for the team. So nonetheless, it's a stout lineup, and I'm very excited and pumped up to see that we're going to see Kiffin Simpson driving for this team in 2024. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Singapore Grand Prix. Now, yesterday we had the Singapore Grand Prix. It was the most intriguing and most entertaining F1 races we have seen in a very long time. For the first time this season, Red Bull did not end up winning. They kind of struggled actually throughout the race, and Max Verstappen was able to cover up to 5th and still get a ton of points. The winner of the race was Carlos Sainz. It came down to really crazy strategy. You had some guys that basically came down during the last safety car. But some guys say out like Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris. You had the Mercedes come in like George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. And they were trying to run down. Now, on the last lap of the race, George Russell ended up crashing. Lewis got up to 3rd. But because of that, I think they threw the safety car, if I'm not mistaken, and we saw Carlos Sainz pick up the victory. Massive congratulations to Carlos Sainz, only his 2nd career F1 win. He's been closer and closer to winning. Ferrari has definitely caught up quite a bit throughout this year. It's very unlikely he's going to win the championship. He's over 200 points back still at this point. But nonetheless, really awesome to see. And it's good to see a non-Red Bull win for the first time in like 17 or 18 races. They struggled, though, Red Bull did, but they still end up getting 5th with Max, which I think is very impressive and incredible accomplishment nonetheless. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Wayne Taylor Racing. Now, it's reported by multiple media outlets that Wayne Taylor Racing is going to have a current F1 driver that will race with their team in the Rolls 24 in 2024. And according to that article, is someone who is doing a really good job in Formula One this year. This is very intriguing. A lot of people assumed that it was going to be Fernando Alonso, but I don't know if that is going to be the case. I don't think Fernando is going to run the Rolls 24 with this team. Obviously, Fernando Alonso has ran with Wayne Taylor Racing before he actually won the Rolls 24 with this team, I think back in 2019 or 2020. I do believe that Wayne Taylor Racing, if ever they get, which I think, let's speculate that a little bit. I think there's a few drivers that I could think of that could get an opportunity. Kevin Magnussen. Kevin Magnussen has ran the Rolex 24 before, and he is a guy who has accomplished a lot. And I remember especially last year when he drove in the Rolex 24 with Ganassi, and he killed it. He did an amazing and incredible job with Ganassi. So maybe he's the driver they're talking about. Maybe it's going to be someone we're not thinking about, like Logan Sargent, perhaps. I know he's struggling in the Formula 1, but there's a lot of uncertainty around his future. Maybe he gets an opportunity, a shot. What about Pierre Gasly? Maybe he gets a chance at an opportunity. I don't know at this point, but nonetheless, whoever gets the ride to drive in the Rolex 24, Wayne Taylor Racing, I think that they're going to be really good and really, really accomplished. So very excited about this and glad to see that we'll see a Formula 1 driver getting an opportunity to drive for Wayne Taylor Racing in the Rolex 24. Will be really, really cool stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, in the NASCAR Cup Series race, Bubba Wallace was able to make it to the round of 12. And he was congratulated by many people in the industry, including his wife, Tyler Reddick, Kurt Busch, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and I believe also Michael Jordan, went up to congratulate Bubba Wallace. A massive accomplishment for Bubba Wallace, in my opinion, for him to make the round of 12. A lot of people coming into this year did not think Bubba Wallace was going to step up to the plate, and he had to step up to the plate. And a lot of people had him going out in the first round of the playoffs. I had said he was going to make it to the round of 12, but I thought it was going to be off of winning at Kansas. Well, Bubba Wallace did everything he had to do, ran a pretty good race, got a lot of stage points in stage 1, and was able to make it to the round of 12, which I think having both 2311 racing cars make it to the round of 12 is an amazing, incredible accomplishment. They're one of only 2 teams that have both their cars make the round of 12. RFK also have both their cars make the round of 12 as well. A lot of people doubt him. They say we weren't supposed to be here. Well, guess what, Bubba? You did what you had to do, and congratulations to him on making it to the round of 12. I think that is a phenomenal and incredible accomplishment, and nonetheless, it's great to see that we're going to see him do good with that accomplishment. Congrats to Bubba on accomplishing that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Dye. As it was announced yesterday, Daniel Dye will drive the 44 for Alpha Prime Racing for 3 races in 2023. He'll run at Texas this weekend to make his Xfinity Series debut. Then he'll run at Las Vegas in a few weeks, and his final race is going to be at Phoenix Raceway. Daniel Dye has been running in the Truck Series all year in the 43 truck for GMS Racing. Obviously, it's uncertain at this point what is going to be happening for him in 2024, though he did say that he does have a ride for the 2024 season. If you were to ask me what's going to happen with Daniel Dye, a lot of people rumor he might be going to McAnally Hilgeman. But let's talk about this. I know a lot of people are probably not going to like that he's getting an opportunity considering he has struggled in the Truck Series here with GMS Racing, but what I've said in the past is some people can do better in different types of vehicles than others. Look at drivers like Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton was not that good in the Truck Series, goes to Xfinity his first year, and goes on to win 4 races as a rookie. He didn't follow it up in 2021, but still was pretty solid in the 2021 season. I think this is a decent choice, and it's not like he's going to a top-tier team. Alpha Prime Racing, while they've shown signs of improvement throughout the week, they had a really strong run at Kansas, and we're having a really strong run at Bristol as well. I would love to see this team continue to improve. Nonetheless, so I'm really glad to see Daniel Dye getting a chance and opportunity. Hopefully he can make the best of it and have a really, really strong run in that car. We'll see what happens though, but nonetheless, glad to see that he'll be in the 44 for Alpha Prime Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lain Riggs. As it was announced this morning that Lain Riggs will drive the 11 for Kaulig Racing for 3 races in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He'll run at Texas this weekend, then at Las Vegas in a few weeks, and then he'll run at Martinsville later this year as well. This is an absolute incredible and a great opportunity for Lain Riggs. Lain Riggs, in my opinion, is one of the most talented young up-and-coming drivers currently at the moment. I have seen what he can do in the Truck Series. He was really good with Spire Motorsports at IRP, finished in the top 5 and got a really strong run with that team. I remember when he drove the 62 truck for Homer Friesen Racing last year at Phoenix. Qualified on the front row, mind you, and led like 5 or 6 laps in that race. And then he's ran for other teams and has done an amazing and incredible job. And Kaulig Racing, while they have definitely struggled at times this year in Xfinity, this team has shown that they can still win races. And I would not be surprised, and this could be a crazy thing, but I would not be surprised if Lain Riggs ends up winning with the 11 team. He's a really great talent. He deserves the opportunity, deserves his chance, and I think Lain Riggs is going to make the best of it this year. He deserves this. I'm excited about this, and I'm glad to see Lain Riggs because I think he's great. He deserves a chance at this. He's been really good in the lower series, and I'm really glad to get to make his Xfinity Series debut and run a few Xfinity races. And I might have to pick him at Martinsville because I think he's going to have a great chance and opportunity to win that race at Martinsville. He deserves this. Happy to see Lain Riggs will be in the 11 car at the next few weeks. Excited about this. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now on Friday night, Dale Jr. made his first of only 2 starts he's making in 2023. As usually, Dale Jr. only runs one race. Of course, he expanded his schedule for 2023. And he made his return at Bristol. Dale Jr. had a great chance to win this race. Unfortunately, with around 30 laps to go in this race, Dale Jr.'s car caught on fire and he had to jump out. And I think it burned his hole through his fire suit, if I'm not mistaken. He had burn marks on his fire suit. Absolute crazy stuff. It was really, really wild to watch because Dale Jr., if you watch this race, this is the most competitive that Dale Jr. has been since probably 2018 at Richmond. They set up a really, really good long-run car, and I thought he was going to go on and win this race. Led a ton of laps. I think he led like 50 or 60 laps in this race. Of course, he got kind of thrown off because of strategy, but still, I think it was really great to see Dale Jr. back out there. It felt like back in the 2000s when Dale Jr. was being really good and doing amazing. And of course, those late resurgence in 2014. It gives me open confidence Dale Jr. can go out there and maybe have a chance, a possibility of winning at Homestead, which I think he's going to be a threat to win there because he historically has been great at Homestead. But it was really cool to see Dale Jr. back out there. I thought he had a chance to get it done. He looked really, really good out there. But nonetheless, I'm really, really glad to see Dale Jr. back out there. And I think he did an amazing and incredible job overall in the race. It's a shame it ended early, but nonetheless, Dale Jr. did a really awesome and great job. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Hocevar. As it was announced yesterday that Carson Hocevar will drive the 42 for Legacy Motor Club for 2 more races. He'll run at Texas this weekend and then next week at Talladega Superspeedway. This is well-deserved in my opinion. Carson Hocevar, in every single race that he's driven a 42 car, he has been incredibly impressive. His first race with them, which was Southern 500, he finished, I think, 17th or 18th. Then the next week at Kansas, he finished in the top 20, I think, in 19th or 20th. And then this past week at Bristol was his most impressive race. He ran in the top 10 in that 42 car and was in the top 5 at majority of that race in a car that has been horrendous throughout this year. And I will tell you this, Carson Hocevar is ready to go cup racing in 2024. Obviously, there's a lot of rumors circulating that Carson Hocevar might be driving for Spire Motorsports. And with Trackhouse coming to play and having an alliance with that team going into next year, if Carson's truly going to that team, I think he's going to be set. But I think Carson Hocevar could seriously be a contender to win in the 42 car, which is something I never would have thought I'd been saying with that 42 car. But that was, I think, the second best finish that 42 car's had. And he's already had, I think, more top 20 finishes or the same amount of top 20 finishes that Noah Gragson had throughout the whole entire year. I think one of the reasons is because Noah Gragson was wrecking his stuff a lot. There's no disrespect to Noah Gragson. It was the truth. A lot of stuff that Noah Gragson drove, he unfortunately wrecked. I think Carson Hocevar has been doing a great job. He's shown a lot of maturity beyond his years. He's been maturing this year, has been getting better out on the racetrack. So I'm really glad to see that Carson Hocevar is going to be back in that 42 car, at least for the next 2 weeks. I hope he gets to run the rest of the year. That's what I'm hoping at this point. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brandon Brown. Now, if you've been on social media over the last day or two, you've probably been seeing Brandon Brown's crusade and going on fire on social media. Now, why has it been going on? Well, Brandon Brown, a lot of people have been talking about how the fact that a lot of people thought that Brandon Brown was the one who made the decision in regards to the LGB coin. Well, that is not the case whatsoever. A lot of people think Brandon Brown owns that organization too. That is not true either. Remember, Brandon Brown is the driver. His father actually owns the team. Now, Brandon Brown basically said that I did not embrace stuff. A lot of people say he did embrace it, but in my opinion, when it comes to the LGB coin and that stuff should never happen in the first place. In 2021, when he won at Talladega, you had a lot of people chanting a chant that I'm not going to say on here. And then Kelly Savitz, who was a reporter at the time on the front stretch, she said, let's go Brandon. And that caused a lot of controversy. And then, of course, a lot of people were going after Kelly Savitz stuff. And since that point, Kelly Savitz, I've heard that she's been doing some ARCA calls. I'm not entirely sure. But she's no longer been on NASCAR broadcasts with NBC. And I believe that Kim Kuhn has been taking over the role of basically her position. It is really disappointing stuff that's happened here. Obviously, Brandon Brown does something never should have happened in the first place. I think he got completely screwed out of a career. I think his dad made the decisions in regards to that, and it's just a really, really screwed up situation that did end up happening with Brandon Brown. I feel bad for him. He didn't want this to happen. I don't think anybody really wanted this to happen for him. It's good to see at least on social media. I don't know if he's ever going to come back. I wish he would come back, but to be honest, all the stuff that's happened, I don't think we're going to see Brandon Brown back in a car, unfortunately, just because of everything that's going on. And I think it's really disappointing, infuriating, and really, really unfortunate. Nonetheless, just overall, the situation is disappointing, and I do feel really, really bad for Brandon Brown that he got kind of screwed out of a career because of this situation. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. once again. Now, I believe it was yesterday or Saturday, Dale Jr. went on social media. He says he's trying to convince other drivers to do a one-off in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He actually had texted two drivers, Jeff Gordon and Jeff Burton. Of course, two drivers who are legends of the NASCAR Cup Series who won a lot of races as well. But Dale Jr. also put out a tweet saying, what other former drivers would you love to see do a one-off in NASCAR? Now, there's been a lot of drivers who have been talking about maybe wanting to come back in the future. One of those drivers has been Carl Edwards. Carl Edwards said publicly in Nashville that he would love to do a one-off with 2311 Racing, but maybe, just maybe, with how good Carl Edwards has been in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, maybe somehow we could see Carl Edwards maybe come back in the future, maybe in the Xfinity Series like Toyota or something, because we know that Carl Edwards, according to Denny Hamlin, has been doing simulator time and simulator work with Joe Gibbs Racing and Toyota as well. So maybe we could see Carl Edwards make a potential comeback. What about Jeff Gordon again? Jeff Gordon has not raced since 2016, at least in NASCAR. Obviously, he did do a one-off or two-off at the Battle of Bricks, I think, with IMSA. I think he did one-off there. He said he kind of struggled with that. Jeff Burton has not raced, I think, since 2014, but it would be cool to see him come do a one-off. Casey Kane's another name I think about. Casey Kane has been kind of saying he would love to do a one-off in NASCAR once again. Casey Kane was a pretty solid driver, won some Xfinity Series races, and of course won a lot of big races, including like 2 or 3 Coca-Cola 600s, and Casey's been saying he wants to come back to the sport. I would love to see a lot of legends of the sport, even Tony Stewart come back. I don't know if Tony Stewart's ever going to come back because he's been fed up with NASCAR. He's been focusing on the NHRA over the last 2 years, and I think he's got a lot of focus on that currently at the moment. But it would be cool to see drivers like Carl Edwards, Jeff Gordon, Jeff Burton. One day, if Kurt Busch ever got clear, maybe do a one-off, but Kurt Busch, I think, is done. If Kevin Harvick ever comes back, maybe after next year, maybe he does a one-off. I don't think Kevin's going to do that. Nonetheless, I think it's very interesting to see what happens in regards to that, but it'd be really, really cool and awesome if we got to see some drivers and legends and former legends of the sport come back and race in NASCAR. So we'll see what happens, but it sounds like at this point in the future, we could see this end up happening, and it would be really exciting and really awesome stuff. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Justin Allgaier. Now, there have been some rumors and chatter circling about Justin Allgaier's future, and maybe he could be leaving to head to Kaulig Racing in 2024. Well, after winning the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Bristol, Justin Allgaier shut those rumors down completely because he had announced that while the contract had not been announced, which it did eventually get announced on Saturday night after the Xfinity Series race, Justin Allgaier will be returning to Junior Motorsports in 2024 in the number 7 car. Justin Allgaier, of course, a really, really good decision from Junior Motorsports. He's been doing a fantastic job with Junior Motorsports for a very, very long time. I think he's one of the winningest Xfinity Series drivers ever. I think he's got like 24 or 25 career NASCAR Xfinity Series wins. And it makes a lot of sense for many reasons why they're bringing Justin Allgaier back. Justin Allgaier is having a really good chance to maybe win his first Xfinity Series championship. He's been so close many years to winning it. I go back to 2016 when he had a chance. He was in the Final Four that year, and I think led the most laps in that race, or close to the most laps. I go back to 2018 where he had one of the strongest seasons where he almost made the championship 4, but got wrecked out of Phoenix, did not have a chance at that. Got taken out by the eventual champion, that being Tyler Reddick, who was his teammate at the time. Then, of course, in 2020 and 2021 and 2019, of course, All those years, he's come close to winning championships. But Justin Allgaier, this could be the year he gets it done. He's got a lot of maturity right now, and he opened up by winning Bristol. I think that number 7 team is coming on strong, and I think they could take it this year to John Hunter and Austin Hill, who both had issues. Well, John Hunter really didn't have issues, but Austin Hill, of course, ended up wrecking, though he's still like 30 points above the cutoff line. But I think it's a great decision from Junior Motorsports to keep Justin Allgaier in that number 7 car next year. I'm glad to see he'll be coming back to the team. I think Justin Allgaier is going to continue doing great things with the number 7 team long term. And I think that he's going to finish his career in Xfinity, which I don't blame him. Justin Allgaier's had a very successful Xfinity Series career. And some drivers can excel, and he could become a Hall of Famer just off of Xfinity stats alone. If he goes on and wins a championship this year, there's a good chance that Justin Allgaier may end up going into the Hall of Fame. So we'll see what happens. But nonetheless, amazing to see that we're going to see Justin Allgaier back in the Xfinity Series with Junior Motorsports in the 2024 season. I think he's earned the right to go back to the team in 2024, and nonetheless, amazing and glad to see that he'll be in the number 7 car once again in 2024. I think he's earned the right to stay in that car, and I'm glad to see he'll be with the team once again in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brandon Jones. As officially announced on Friday, along with the Justin Allgaier news, that Brandon Jones will also be returning to Junior Motorsports in 2024, driving the number 9 car. Now, this was confirmed a few weeks ago from Dalton Hopkins from Front Stretch, and Brandon Jones had told him that he was going to be returning in 2024. But now it's official, and Junior Motorsports confirmed it this past week. Now, in my personal opinion, a lot of you are going to be asking, why is Brandon Jones coming back to Junior Motorsports? Because let's be perfectly honest, Brandon Jones has not had a good year with Junior Motorsports in 2023. He's only had 3 top 5s and 7 top 10s or 6 top 10s, and also has had a lot of DNFs and a lot of crashes throughout the whole entire season. Well, a big reason why Brandon Jones is sticking around with Junior Motorsports in 2024 is because of the sponsorship and funding that he has. Brandon Jones has been sponsored by Menards throughout his whole entire racing career. And his dad, of course, is a co-owner of Rheem, and they're a major branded company, and they have a big association with Menards. And I will say this about Brandon Jones. Yes, Brandon Jones has not had a good year with Junior Motorsports. That is factual. We need to look at this. Brandon Jones, remember last year, he almost made the championship 4 and was 1 lap away from winning that race and was leading and got dumped by his teammate Ty Gibbs. And remember, he won a race in Martinsville and made it to the round of 8. And go back to 2020. Brandon Jones that year won 3 races and straight up beat Kyle Busch in the Xfinity Series at Phoenix, which I think is a really impressive accomplishment. And I will give a little defense to Brandon Jones. I feel like Brandon Jones has been getting a little better as the year has progressed. A lot of those top 5s and top 10s have come in the last 10 or 11 races. And he's shown a lot more consistency and speed. And that Bristol race where he got unfortunately wrecked out when his teammates wrecked each other, yeah, he was in the top 5 a lot of that race and was running second for a majority of that event. So I am disappointed. I understand why people are upset that Brandon Jones is going back to the 9 car, but it's not a shocking surprise. Brandon Jones brings sponsorship funding, and of course, I think it's stability for the team to keep him in that 9 car going into 2024. So, of course, now we know that Sam Mayer's coming back, and of course, Justin Allgaier coming back, Brandon Jones returning. What happens to the 8 car? Well, I'm starting to think that Sammy Smith is getting that ride next year. There's been a lot of rumors and chatter circulating that Sammy Smith is the most likely driver to end up driving the number 8 car next year in 2024. Sammy Smith has Pilot Flying J funding, and of course, Sammy Smith has not signed his contract extension with JGR at this point. So I'm starting to think that we're going to end up seeing Brandon Jones in the 9 car into Sammy Smith in the 8 car, and then of course I will confirm the lineup. I think Sammy Smith's a very, very talented driver. But nonetheless, I'm not sure how to feel, but I think it's a decent decision from Junior Motorsports to keep Brandon Jones around because remember, he's got sponsorship and funding, and that's a massive and huge reason why he's sticking around with Junior Motorsports in the 2024 season. So while I think a lot of people are disappointed by the decision to keep him around, you gotta remember, he has sponsorship and funding with the team and the organization. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course in Chicagoland. Now, Chase Holden, who is a part of the Garage Guys FS, which of course he, Dale Tanner, a couple other people do run that group, he basically put out a very interesting scoop on social media on Friday afternoon. He says, according to sources that have told him, he says Chicago Street Course is returning in 2024, but interestingly, not in 2025. Now remember, the Chicago Street Course and NASCAR do have a 2-3 year contract with the city. But according to Chase Holden, he says the Chicagoland is likely going to, they're trying 100% to return to Chicagoland in 2025. Now, a lot of people are going to be saying, is Chicagoland dead? No, it's not dead. As a matter of fact, this past weekend on Saturday night, they had a motocross playoff race there this past weekend. And of course, we saw some pretty good racing, I think, in that event as well. So racing is returning to Chicagoland. And remember, Julie Geis is working with Chicagoland as well. And of course, she's a big reason why we have the Chicago Street Race in the first place. Here's what I'll say about Chicago Street Course coming back in 2024. I think it's absolutely right decision. Unfortunately, in 2023, while the Cup Series race was actually really, really entertaining and really, really good, it sadly got affected by weather throughout the whole entire event. So I think it deserves another year, another opportunity, and another shot to run in 2024. And hopefully in 2024, maybe they get change of policies for Chicago and make sure that that doesn't become an issue in the 2024 year, where we still have a lot of those issues with the parks and stuff. Because that was a big reason why everything got shut down. Rain and weather, you can't control the weather. Remember, the Xfinity race could not even get completely to halfway because of that reason. But as for Chicago and likely coming back in 2025, I absolutely want this to end up coming true. Because Chicagoland, in my opinion, especially with the next-gen car and how well raced on intermediate tracks, Chicagoland would put on a barn burner race. If you think Kansas is great, Chicagoland, I think, is a better racetrack. I think it'll be one of the best races we see in 2025 if it does end up coming back. And I think the racing would be absolutely killer. Now, of course, people do need to show up to Chicago. And that's a big reason why, unfortunately, lost a date. You know, it was a pandemic that was the other major reason why they ended up losing a date. But still, I really want this track to come back in 2025. If we truly is the last year of Chicago Street Course, hey, at least they got a few years only. It's not a one-off year. Obviously, NASCAR has been having conversations about having more different types of races and stuff in different areas, like different street course races in like New York City and also up in Canada and Mexico City and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't sound like that's going to be happening. It sounds like Chicago Street Course coming back, which again, I don't have a problem with. We got a really cool storyline of Shane Van Gisbergen, of course, is now coming to NASCAR full-time in 2024 in all three series. And I think it's going to be really interesting and cool to see what happens. But nonetheless, amazing to see that Chicago Street Course is coming back in 2024. I know a lot of people probably will disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. But I don't care. I'm really glad to see it sounds like at this point that it's coming back in 2024, which I think is a good and solid decision. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Road America. Now, yesterday, an unfortunate report came out from a Wisconsin journalist, including Dave Kalaman. And according to him, Road America and Milwaukee and Wisconsin in general will not likely be hosting any NASCAR races in 2024. Meaning that for the first time since 2009, Road America will not be hosting a race. According to the article, track shareholders were told that NASCAR will not be up there. Now, interestingly, in the article, it does mention that Road America could be going on a 1-year hiatus. Here's what I want to say about this. I think that this is a very, very bad decision that Road America will not host a race in 2024. Now, if it's just a 1-year hiatus, it ain't completely the end of the world. However, I think if there's any road course that 1000% deserves to be on the NASCAR schedule, regardless of any series, it is Road America. Let's go back to the Xfinity Series race that just happened this year. It was one of the best Xfinity Series races that I have seen in a very, very long time. And yes, oil came on the racetrack, but that finish was the Xfinity Series version of the 2012 Watkins Glen finish, which is considered to be one of the 2 or 3 best finishes in NASCAR Cup Series history, one of the craziest finishes and all-time great finishes ever. And that Xfinity race was up there as one of the best finishes we probably have ever seen, and it was absolutely amazing. And another big reason why I think this is a huge disappointment is because of the fact of the attendance. Hundreds of thousands of people, regardless of series, go out to Road America. Now, one thing that does hurt Road America, though, is the fact that they're independently owned racetrack, which I think it's a big reason why they made this decision. But I do think another reason why, if it is a 1-year hiatus, why they're doing this is because of the Olympics, unfortunately. But man, it just sucks that Road America isn't going to be racing in 2024. Because like I said, I think Road America just always puts on amazing, killer, and barn burner races. And the fact that it's likely not coming back in 2024, I think is unfortunate and just really, really sucks in general. So I am disappointed by the news. It sucks. I love Road America. I think it's a great racetrack. and it does deserve to be on the schedule next year. And the fact that it's likely not coming back in 2024, I think is just really unfortunate and really, really sucks. So I'm disappointed by the news. We'll see what officially comes out, but it sounds like at this point it ain't coming out in 2024. They're going to be racing, which I think is going to be the first time in like a long time they're not even racing up in Wisconsin in general. So they were racing in Milwaukee before that. And speaking of Milwaukee not being on schedule, that's another thing I really hate, because I think the attendance for the race, the truck race, was really, really good and was really, really awesome. So just disappointing in general that we will not be seeing races at Road America in 2024. Just really unfortunate and crappy news. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the 16 car for Kaulig Racing. Now, on Friday, it was officially announced that Daniel Hemrick will drive the 31 car for Kaulig Racing in 2024. Now, we all thought we were getting both drivers announced for their team for 2024. But Matt Kaulig and Chris Rice stated that they are excited about the driver of the 16 Cup car, but they did not announce that driver. They'll announce it at a later date. Obviously, there's been a lot of speculation on what's going on with that number 16 car, because we're not sure if AJ Allmendinger is going to be returning to that 16 car in the 2024 season. If you were to ask me right now, I do not believe that he'll be returning to the 16 car, AJ Allmendinger. But we know for sure he'll be back in NASCAR. I think AJ Allmendinger is moving back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. Look, AJ Allmendinger's got more family at this point. And AJ, I think, had a lot more fun in the NASCAR Xfinity Series than the Cup Series. Now, I will say he had a very, very solid and a really, really good year in the Cup Series, considering Kaulig Racing, they're not a top-tier team. He did struggle at times racing in the Cup Series this year, but that team has shown signs, and pretty big signs, of improvement throughout the 2023 season. So it is disappointing if AJ's moving back down to Xfinity, but he had a lot more fun in Xfinity and had won 2 Xfinity races, and it seems like every time he wins, regardless of what series he's in, he gets more pumped up and really, really excited. With AJ Allmendinger likely moving back down to Xfinity, though, who's going to get the 16 right? And that's going to be the intriguing thing. There's a lot of drivers who are in the rumblings. Some people think it could be Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith, of course, driving full-time under 16 Xfinity car right now, could get that ride, but I think he needs a little more Cup Series starts before he gets the opportunity and chance to run in that car. Other names I've seen speculated are Noah Gragson. Noah Gragson is back, and he now can return to NASCAR, and I think he is coveting for that 16 ride because he has driven a 16 car before. But I don't know if he's going to be racing in the Cup Series. He could race in Xfinity or trucks next year in 2024, but maybe he could get the 16. That could be certainly a possibility. What about Matt DiBenedetto? Matt DiBenedetto does not have a ride currently for the 2024 season. If you were to ask me, Matt DiBenedetto would be a pretty solid and a really good choice for the 16. He creates stability, he doesn't tear up equipment, and he did a pretty solid job with the Wood brothers the few years he was with that team. Came close to winning a few races and was a solid contender in that ride. Other people have speculated other names, but a name that I think that a lot of people are looking at take that 16 as well, and I don't like to hear this name, Ty Dillon. Ty Dillon's likely not returning to Spire in 2024. And if you were to ask me about Ty Dillon, I don't want to see him in a 16 car. But it sounds like he's one of the favorites. And if you, like I said, no disrespect Ty Dillon. He is not that great of a driver. He's decent, but not great. And he's not going to make your team better. He is going to struggle. Every ride that he has been in, he has been behind his teammates. He will be behind Daniel Hemrick next year if he does truly end up in this 16 car. But he's one of the favorites, and he's got sponsorship funding, and of course, Kaulig Racing does have an alliance with Richard Childress Racing, which would be a pretty big reason why he would end up in the 16 car in the first place. I just think, I don't know at this point, I really personally do not want to see him in his 16 car in 2024, but I think he's one of the favorites for that 16 car and coveting for that ride currently at the moment. So we'll see what happens in regards to that. I really, like I said, hope, though, that we do not end up seeing him in the 16 car, and hope it goes to Matt DiBenedetto or Noah Gragson. I think both drivers are more worthy of the 16 car than Ty Dillon, but it's Ty Dillon who has a really good chance of getting that ride in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bristol Dirt. Now, there have been some talk and chatter that Bristol Dirt was not going to be returning in 2024. And it was officially confirmed this past weekend on Friday afternoon that Bristol Dirt will not be returning in 2024. And there will be 2 concrete dates at Bristol in the 2024 season. Now, dates are to be announced. There's a lot of talk and chatter. The schedule is likely going to be released sometime this week, but the dates, what they said, were not announced at the time. Look, if you were to ask me, I am a big fan of Bristol Dirt, and I really enjoyed Bristol Dirt the last years. I think the event was really starting to come into its own, and it had been really good racing, especially in the final year. But let's be perfectly honest about Bristol Dirt. The racing itself was good, but the fans were not showing up. There were not a really, really great attendance for the last race of Bristol Dirt. It was kind of similar to what we had before the event. And I will say I am happy to see that there will be 2 concrete dates in 2024. But here's one thing I do want to say. With there being 2 concrete dates, people do need to show up. The big reason why Bristol Dirt came in the first place in 2021 is because people were not showing up to the spring date. I remember back to 2019, and no one showed up. Remember, they had to cut off turn 1 and turn 3, and people only could sit on the front stretch and the back stretch. And it looked so ominous, and the crowd size was just pitiful in that final year. Also, another big reason why I think a lot of people are skeptical, and I can understand this, is the next-gen car. Look, I think Bristol this past weekend had a better race than what we had in 2022. But it's no secret that dirty air is still a major, major issue. We had a conveyor belt race for majority, and a lot of people could not pass. It was very impossible, and you had to get the high line working for people were able to pass. Dirty air is still a major prevalent issue. They didn't run the complete short track package. They kind of ran the intermediate package, and dirty air was still very, very prevalent. So hopefully that could be fixed going forward so the racing can be really, really good. But I do love Bristol Concrete too. I think the racing is really, really great usually at Bristol Concrete, and especially with the Xfinity Series, they do end up having 2 concrete dates. Now, it sounds like though with Bristol Dirt, they will not have, if it gone, I want to hopefully see a dirt race like at Eldora maybe next year. I think a dirt race should be on the NASCAR schedule personally, and we know that Tony Stewart has been trying to get a dirt race at Eldora. Maybe NASCAR can work with Tony Stewart again and get Eldora back on the schedule, whether maybe just for the truck series, but I would love to see a dirt race back on the schedule in 2024, so I personally think dirt racing should be in NASCAR. Now, the big question revolves around when should the date be? For me, it shouldn't be in the spring. It should be in May or June, and I'll explain why. I go back to 2020 during the COVID year when they had the Bristol spring race moved to May and June. There was no rain in the forecast, and I thought that was one of the best races I have ever seen in my life. It was incredible, and it was one of the most best races. I think it was the best race of 2020 personally, and I think it should come back in 2024, should be moved to May and June. I think it'd be much better racing it there, and I think you won't have it. I think more people will show up, and I think that the weather is going to be a lot better. The biggest problem with the spring day has been the weather. I've gone back and looked at a lot of the races. And outside, I think only 3 years in the last 10 years have not been affected by rain. 2014, affected by rain. 2015, rain delays throughout. 2016, was able to go through. 2017, moved to Monday. 2018, moved to Monday. So I think it started on Sunday, moved to Monday because of snow and rain. 2019, they got to go through that one. 2020 got affected because of the pandemic. 2021, with Bristol Dirt, moved to Monday. 2022 had rain throughout the event, and in 2023, of course, we were lucky not to have rain issues. I really hope with Bristol Dirt that if with the event they move it to a little bit later in the year and don't have it in March. And my question is, what happens to Easter? It sounds like it's not going to be on Easter. Rumor mill suggests North Wilkesboro is going to end up getting the date in 2024 for Easter. It's going to get a points paying event. But again, I really hope when it comes to NASCAR's short track program, they can't get that fixed because I think the race could definitely be better at Bristol because I think it will be better. But I will say we did have overall a pretty solid and good race. This time around, it was decent, but it wasn't fantastic, and dirty air was still prevalent. So we'll see what happens going in the future. We now know for sure that it is returning, and we'll have 2 concrete Bristol dates in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about the LA Coliseum. As it was officially announced yesterday during the NFL game that the LA Coliseum and NASCAR will return to the LA Coliseum in 2024 on February 4th, 2024. In addition to that, there will also be a NASCAR Mexico Series race in 2024, right before the LA Coliseum event. Let's start off with the NASCAR Mexico Series race. That, I think, is going to be really, really intriguing and is going to make the ticket even bigger. From what I understand, the NASCAR Mexico Series always puts on really awesome and great racing. And we've seen a lot of drivers come from the NASCAR Mexico Series. Jorge Godas races down there, I believe, still to this day. And, of course, Daniel Suarez, I believe, won a couple of NASCAR Mexico championships as well down there. And the racing course, from what I hear, is phenomenal, incredible. And I think the racing is going to be really, really good. And I will say this. I'm glad that this is going to be the Clash and not a points paid event. Because there have been some chatter and rumors circulating that this was potentially going to be a points paid event. I am glad to see that NASCAR did come to their senses and decided to continue this as an exhibition event. And I really hope going into next year with this being an exhibition event, I want to see this race not with 26 or 27 cars. The big problem with last year's race is there were way too many cars that got on the racetrack. I want to see them go back to the eligibility that they had in 2022, where they had only 24 cars, I think, make the event. I think only the top 4 made it from each heat. I think last year, I think the top 5 made it from each heat. And I think then the top 2 or top 3 from the exhibition. Of course, the highest finishing champ, which was the champion, was able to get locked in regardless. And the only person was able to lock their way in. I think too many people got into this year's event, and I think it did end up affecting the race. And of course, I think there were other things that could have been better, like Fox's coverage. Fox's coverage was not very great, in my opinion. Let's just be perfectly honest. And we know that Fox's coverage has been terrible and horrendous. So I will say they got Kevin Harvick joining the team this year, which I think will at least help the broadcast going into 2024. But I am glad to see that they're returning to LA Coliseum. You got to stay in the LA market because remember, Auto Club is not returning in 2024 and probably won't be returning anytime soon. May never end up returning. So you got to stay in the LA market, and I think NASCAR made the right decision. Again, I know a lot of people will disagree, but you got to stay in the LA market, and I think we've seen TV ratings. They did go down for 2023, but they still end up having a lot of people tune in to the LA Clash, and I really hope that Fox can promote the race a lot, which I think they're going to promote the race quite a bit, but they better also promote the Daytona 500 as well and promote the hell out of that race. But I am glad to see the LA Coliseum is returning in 2024. And now that goes and brings up the other topic conversation. What happens with the rest of the schedule? Like I said with the Bristol Dirt story, I think that the schedule is likely going to be coming out sometime in the next week or two. I think it's going to be coming out this week personally, maybe even tomorrow, maybe later this week, because with all the schedule announcements, we talk about Road America likely not returning, Bristol Dirt is going to be gone, and Bristol Concrete returning, and then of course at the LA Coliseum, I'm starting to believe that the 2024 NASCAR schedule is going to be coming out sometime this week, probably later this week as a matter of fact. There's a lot of other rumors and chatter. Sonoma might be moving to the West Coast swing. There's a lot of chatter that Montreal is going to be coming back in 2024. There's other rumors in circulating that said with North Wilkesboro likely to be hosted on Easter. There's been rumors about Rockingham potentially coming back. Richmond having a doubleheader next year because of the Olympics. A couple weeks off for NASCAR there. And maybe only having 2 off weeks be during the Olympics. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to what happens to the schedule. We 1,000% know for sure that the LA Coliseum is coming back next year, 2024. I really hope they get some more popular acts. Bring J Balvin out. Hell, J Balvin brought a lot of people in. Maybe have him as maybe like the halftime show. Because they did have Wiz Khalifa as a halftime show. I don't think Wiz Khalifa really cared. Let's be perfectly honest. With the halftime show, bring Travis Scott in, bring Morgan Wallen in, bring somebody who's kind of a little more relevant at this point, though Wiz Khalifa was pretty relevant. But let's bring some people in like Morgan Wallen or something along those lines, because I think people would be really excited about that. So nonetheless, I'm glad to see that the LA Clash is returning in 2024. As I think personally, the event deserved to have another year, another chance to come out. So glad to see the LA Coliseum is for sure returning in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Zane Smith. Now, I talked about this on the channel, did a breaking news story in regards to that. But if you did not watch that video, Zane Smith was officially announced that he'll be driving and joining Trackhouse Racing and the Trackhouse Racing family in 2024. And will drive for Spire Motorsports and a third Spire Motorsports car in 2024. Presumably the number 78. Now, why is Spire Motorsports expanding in 2024? Well, of course, Zane Smith signed a multi-year deal with Trackhouse Racing, but Spire Motorsports has bought the Live Fast Motorsports charter for $40 million, and they sold the charter to Spire Motorsports. Now, a lot of people are going to be asking what is going to happen with Live Fast Motorsports. Well, Live Fast Motorsports is going to run a part-time schedule in 2024, and they'll likely reveal most of those details throughout this week. Now, Bob Jenkins also released a statement thanking Zane for everything that he's done for the team and thanking him for all the accomplishments. Let's talk about this move for Zane Smith. This, in my opinion, is an absolute major dub on all aspects. First of all, Spire Motorsports is going to have an alliance with Trackhouse Racing, so they're going to be getting some Trackhouse Racing equipment. Spire Motorsports has been showing also major signs of improvement throughout the 2023 year. We've seen what Corey LaJoie has been able to do. He led a lot of laps in this past week's race at Bristol, obviously crashed out, but they've been showing major signs of improvement throughout 2023. And with having an alliance with Trackhouse Racing and with Andretti Autosport coming in and having, of course, Gamebridge, a major partner coming in to sponsor as well, they've been able to invest and make their equipment a lot better as well. And I think when it comes to Zane Smith going to Trackhouse Racing, it comes full circle for this team because Zane Smith originally, remember, was going to drive for Chip Ganassi Racing in 2022. But remember 2021, it was announced in June of that year, in late June, that Chip Ganassi Racing had been bought up by Trackhouse Racing. And basically, Zane Smith has said this publicly, that the team that he wanted to drive for, and he told us that 365 days ago, someone asked him where you want to drive, he said Trackhouse Racing. I am a huge fan of this team, and I love that Zane Smith is going to be part of the Trackhouse Racing family going into the 2024 season. Now, obviously, he will drive for Spire Motorsports, of course, so in 2024. So what are the expectations for Zane Smith going into 2024? Well, I think Zane Smith's expectations are going to be really solid and pretty high. I think Zane Smith will do a pretty solid job in the number 78 cars. I think that's the number they're going to end up using in 2024. I think Zane Smith is going to do a really solid job with this team, especially with how much better I think Spire Motorsports has gotten. I think that they're going to end up being much more competitive. And I think Zane Smith will be a contender for the Rookie of the Year, which he'll be in a really solid Class Tech series. You're going to have Josh Berry and like another driver we'll get to here in just a second. Now, speaking of Spire Motorsports, let's talk about this team because we know that Corey LaJoie has also signed a multi-year deal with Spire Motorsports. What happens to the 77 car? Well, it sounds more than likely at this point that the guy I talked about earlier, Carson Hocevar, is likely going to end up in the 77 car next year in the 2024 year. And I say this to Carson Hocevar deserves to drive a 77 car next year and I think Carson Hocevar as well will get select starts in the Xfinity Series as well in that number 77 car, which I also do believe that Zane Smith will get opportunities and chances to drive in the 77 car as well in Xfinity and get some Xfinity experience there. And I think that program is only going to end up getting better. I think you're going to see that lineup be really stout. Now let's go to Live Fast Motorsports. I know a lot of people are probably upset that Live Fast Motorsports has sold their charter. Well, I think this actually is a very solid decision for BJ McLeod and Matt Tiff. Look, they got $40 million where they now can invest and make their program much better in the Xfinity Series. This year, their Xfinity program has shown major signs of improvement. Look at Anthony Alfredo's been able to accomplish with that team this year. He has done a pretty solid and a very good job with that team this year at times. Yes, they've struggled as well, but them getting $40 million, even putting a quarter of that money in, $10 million to $15 million, could make the organization one of the top teams. And they can maybe expand their program again and bring in drivers, let's say Matt DiBenedetto, if he doesn't go to call. Maybe he goes there and drives for their team. Maybe a driver like Noah Gragson drives the BJ McLeod's team. It will make their program much better. And hey, you know what's the good news? They're not leaving the series altogether. They're going to be sticking around the Cup Series. They're just not going to be full-time in 2024. So overall, I think Live Fast is making a great decision. And $40 million is a really good thing. And I think charters are only going to get more and more expensive because $40 million is the benchmark. We may end up seeing charters go up to $50 million. I know Jordan Bianchi and Jeff Gluck mentioned this, but they remember like Spire Motorsports bought the charters and bought the Furniture Rose Racing charter for $6 million just 5 years ago, which at the time was considered really expensive. Now charters have gotten way more expensive, and you're seeing expansion there. Going back though and talking about Zane Smith, this is a well-deserved opportunity for Zane Smith. Zane Smith going to Trackhouse is a great deal, but they're looking past 2024. They want to bring Zane Smith into the Trackhouse Racing family in 2025. Obviously, they're going to have 4 drivers that are going to be coveting for that program in 2025. Of course, if Trackhouse could maybe try to acquire another charter somehow from another team to expand their program in 2025 to 4 cars, they potentially could have a 4-car lineup in 2025. Because remember, Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be full-time in NASCAR in 2024 and will be racing select starts with their team in 2024. And of course, Daniel Suarez signed a multi-year contract with the team through 2025, and Ross Chastain has a long-term deal with Track. Trackhouse Racing and has accomplished quite a bit with this team for the last few years. He's able to make it around a 12 and also has won this year with the team as well. They could have a really solid lineup in 2025, and honestly, I am really, really excited about the long-term future. I know there are a lot of people speculating about Daniel Suarez's future past 2024, but remember, both drivers in February have signed multi-year agreements with the team. I just think Zane Smith is the future of this organization. Seeing him come full circle and drive for the team in 2025, I think is an incredible accomplishment. But there's another part of the story that we need to talk about, and that involves Stewart-Haas Racing. Stewart-Haas Racing and Ford has lost another driver. They have potential to pick up 3 big drivers over the last few years that they've completely blown. First, Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson could have driven for Stewart-Haas Racing in 2021, and Tony Stewart had been willing to bring Kyle Larson into the team. And they lost Kyle Larson to Hendrick Motorsports. Now, obviously, before all this stuff that happened, Kyle Larson ended up happening. He was likely to end up at Hendrick Motorsports regardless. But he was in the running to potentially go to that team, Stewart-Haas, in 2021, and they blew it there. Then remember last year, during the Kyle Busch sweepstakes, there have been a lot of talk and chatter circulating, and Kyle Busch potentially could end up driving for that team in 2023. They lost Kyle Busch as well, and Kyle Busch was someone who was going to probably do really great things and bring the best out of equipment, and of course they lost him to RCR. And now Stewart-Haas Racing, who had a chance to pick up Zane Smith for 2024, they lost Zane Smith now, and that's a massive loss for Ford, in my opinion, losing Zane Smith. So now, what does Ford have left? They've got Haley Deegan, they got Frankie Muniz perhaps, and then of course you got a couple other drivers like, I don't know, Riley Herbst and Cole Custer that are left in your team, your development. They need to find someone in. Of course, they got Josh Berry coming into Ford, but he's going to be in the Cup Series next year. He's not going to Stewart-Haas Xfinity program. So at this point, with Eric Almirola likely retiring, who ends up taking over the 10 car next year? Cole Custer probably, which again, I don't think is a great decision long term. I personally don't know what's going to happen to SHR past this year. Obviously, there's a lot of chatter that SHR could downsize the end of the year. Maybe RFK picks up a charter. Who knows at this point, but I mean, Ford just lost another really, really talented driver, and I think it's just a massive, massive loss for Ford, in my honest opinion. But going back to Zane, I'm excited for him. I'm glad he's going to be part of the Trackhouse Racing family 2024, and I think Zane Smith is going to excel with Trackhouse Racing in 2024. I think he's going to do great things with Trackhouse long term, Inspire as well, and I'm glad to see he'll be joining the Trackhouse Racing family starting in 2024. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How well do you think Zane Smith is going to form a Trackhouse Inspire in 2024? And what are your thoughts about the LA Coliseum and Bristol Dirt's decisions? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, we'll have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race picks for Texas Motor Speedway. Then, of course, tomorrow we'll probably have maybe a silly season update drop in the channel, recapping some silly season news that's come out over the last month or so. And then, of course, we'll likely talk about maybe if the schedule gets announced tomorrow, maybe that we'll talk about that as well. And then, of course, on Wednesday, we'll have a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel. Got a lot of great content dropping on the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.